ever heard of the MTHFR gene mutation? Yes, that's what it's called. It's becoming a little bit more well known, especially if you're already in the natural health circles. And one of the things that I've heard about and more questions that I'm getting is, can you consume bread if you have the MTHFR gene mutation? Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. I teach you why you should be milling your wheat, consuming whole grains, how to do it, so on and so forth, and more. Okay, so as I stated in this video, we're gonna be talking about the MTHFR gene mutation. If you don't know what it is, don't worry, I will give y'all a brief overview about it. But the reason I'm talking about it is because I'm actually starting to see more and more questions from me asking, well, can I consume bread if I have this gene mutation? And follow along because we'll be discussing how this links up to bread in just a bit. But in this video, we're going to be talking about, first of all, I'm going to be telling y'all just a brief overview of MTHFR gene, what it means if your gene has mutated, all the things with that. Number two, we're then just going to answer the question of whether you can consume bread if you have the MTHFR gene mutation. And then third, we have to give you some Felicia theory, because I have some theories about this that you're going to want to hear about. Now, before we begin, I do want to give the typical FDA medical disclaimer. I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. Please consult your medical doctor. This is not considered health advice. I am just a mom who really loves to research and has a very high reading comprehension. So there you go, FDA. Hope you're happy. All right, so first of all, let's give you a brief overview of the MTHFR gene. What does it do in our bodies? What does it mean if it is mutated? And what is it doing when it is mutated? First of all, just know that everyone has this gene, okay? Everyone has it, just like all of our genes and just like all of our genetics. You inherit one from your mom and one from your dad. So MTHFR is actually an abbreviation for the gene, and we abbreviate it for this reason because it stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. Yes, I practice saying that word many, many times. And what this gene does is it provides instructions for making an enzyme called that, and this enzyme plays a role in processing amino acids. And what your amino acids do is they are the building blocks of proteins that we need in our body. It is specifically very important for the processing, for the chemical reaction involving vitamin B9, or what we know as folate, or you may know it as folic acid, and that is very important, and we're going to get to the differences between the two later on, so stay tuned. So specifically, what it does is converts a form of folate called 5,10-methylene tetrahydrofolate to a different form of folate called 5-methylene tetrahydrofolate. Ooh, that's a mouthful. And this is the primary form of folate found in your blood. And the folate in your blood is part of the multi-step process that converts the amino acid homocysteine to another amino acid, methionine. And methionine is used by your body to make proteins and other important compounds. So do know real quick, all of my sources will be linked below if you really want to check them out. Okay, so when the gene is properly functioning, so you do not have this gene mutation, it is basically highly efficient at converting vitamin B9 or folate into the usable form methylfolate. When the gene is mutated, the capacity to convert folate into methylfolate is reduced by about 40 to 70%. So basically, in a nutshell, what the gene mutation can do, and you may notice, and you may have problems if you have the gene mutation. You may not, because there are varieties of it being mutated, but bottom line is it basically can really impair the ability to break down folic acid and also to help eliminate other substances like heavy metals. So some symptoms that you may see if this gene mutation is really messing with you is you may have a high toxicity load. You know, your body is having issues detoxifying. You also may be greatly deficient in vitamin B9, folate, also vitamins B6 and B12. There are also other issues such as fatigue, cardiovascular miscarriages. It may contribute to miscarriages as well as birth defects. So again, I know that this is, so we've thrown a lot of words and sciencey stuff at you, but one big takeaway I want you to take away is the biggest thing that I think people notice is that their body they are having issues breaking down and processing folic acid, which we'll get to the difference between folic acid and folate in a minute. But that's the biggest thing you need to remember is folic acid can now be a bigger deal, as well as people may be experiencing an inability to detoxify. Their bodies may not be able to get rid of heavy metals. And also know that if you're unable to process folic acid and you have high amounts of that in your body, that in of itself can be a toxin and can actually possibly be linked to causing cancer. That's the biggest thing that you need to remember. MTHFR gene mutation, processing and problems processing folic acid. Lodge that in your brain, because number two, we're going to talk about now, can you have bread? Is bread okay to have if you have the MTHFR gene mutation? If you have found out that you do have this gene mutation, you may have been told to eliminate bread. The answer of whether you can have bread, I would say, depends on what type of bread we are talking about. And this is where I'm going to get into the difference between folic acid and folate, because this is where it matters. Basically, what you need to know is folate, or vitamin B9, is the natural form of folic acid. It is the natural form of vitamin B9. So folate is naturally found in many foods that God created for us to eat. Things like leafy greens and your whole grains. Anything with your high vitamin Bs, your vitamin B complex, that's going to have folate, the natural form of vitamin B9. Folic acid is the synthetic, man-made form of folate. So where's folic acid found? It is especially found in your enriched grain products. So anytime you go to the store and any flour that you pull off the shelf, it's a white flour, it's going to say it's enriched flour. And that is because wheat, as you know, if you've been following this channel long enough, contains 40 out of 44 essential nutrients. But when you take the German brand out and you now present white flour, you have removed a significant amount of those nutrients, and only 5 are put back in when they have enriched the flour. And that has a whole history of it too, of why they chose these specific vitamins to put back in. But folic acid is one of those vitamins. Vitamin B9 is one of those vitamins that you find in enriched flour. The reason why that they added that in is they wanted to combat specifically birth defects, neural tube defects, to be even more specific. They were starting to see these, and in 1992, the government really was out to make sure that all enriched flour and grain products, so not only your flours, your breads, but also your cereals, to make sure that they have folic acid in them to combat these birth defects and to make sure you get enough of the folic acid. And by 1998, all of the enriched flour and enriched grain products now have folic acid. So that is a problem. If you have the MTHFR gene mutation and have an inability to process synthetic folic acid, you have a problem. And yes, I would say you need to be avoiding those enriched bread products from the store. However, you can have bread so long as you are actually consuming it whole and intact. And this mainly comes from you actually having the wheat berries, milling them yourself at home to create a true whole grain flour, and then baking bread from that whole grain flour that contains folate, the real form of vitamin B9, not the fake folic acid. And that's the type of bread that I say, I think you're pretty good to have. So this now leads to number 3, Felicia theory. So here's my theory of why we are starting to see more people having these issues, and why this is, we're starting to have more research into this, why it's becoming a bit more well-known. Now, first of all, I can't remember if I mentioned that if you think that you have this and it's causing problems for you, do know you have to ask your doctor. The only way to know if you have this gene mutation is to actually have genetic testing done. So there you go. But some Felicia theory with this of why this is a problem. And I do think a big root cause of this is because of our enriched flour or enriched grain products. Like I said, by 1998, everything had been enriched with folic acid. If it was made with enriched flour of some kind, that it was enriched with folic acid. And so for those of us who are millennials especially, and born 80s, 90s, you're growing up in this, we're consuming a lot of that synthetic folic acid. On top of that, if you've ever been pregnant in the past few decades, your doctor or midwife or medical professional, whatever, probably told you that it's so important for you to have folic acid while you are pregnant, because again, a lack of vitamin B9 can lead to birth defects, and it is important to have. It is important to have vitamin B9 whenever you're pregnant. And so I think the fact that we have been consuming more of the synthetic folic acid, it's also in your multivitamins. If you take a multivitamin with a synthetic folic acid in it, then you're getting it there. And then now we've had decades of people who may have had this gene mutation now be building up an overload in their bodies of this synthetic folic acid. And now it's causing problems. So I think that's why we're kind of seeing more of it now, is because we're kind of reaping what we sow from whenever folic acid was put into all of our rich flour and bread products in the 1990s. So I would say, my theory, we have white flour to thank for this. I think a lot has to do with the white flour. So if you are consuming real whole grains, eating a balanced diet, eating the foods that God created as food, and as closest to the way as He gave it to us as possible, then I think you'll be good. So bottom line that I want you to take away from this is vitamin B9 you need, but that's folate. And that is only found, as far as grains go, if you actually are consuming real whole grains, not the enriched bread products and flour that you find in the store. That's the biggest takeaway that I want you to take away from this video, is just consume vitamins the way that God intended you to get them, through your food. Be careful of the synthetic supplements and vitamins, especially if you have this, you do have to be careful of the folic acid if you're taking that in a synthetic form. And that is my theory. I think a lot of this is white flour, enriched white flour, that we have to blame for this. So that's pretty much it right there. I know this was a little bit more technical of a video. Hopefully you were able to follow along. And if you want to know more about why you should be milling your wheat, why you should be consuming real whole grains, then be sure to check out this video here. I do a deep dive into that. And of course, check out my sources below if you want to also take a deep dive into this gene mutation. As always, I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week.